Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest record from Beyond the Black, the self-titled Beyond the Black, out January 13th on Nuclear Blast. This album has 10 tracks, 42 minutes in length, and this is the band's fifth full-length studio album. They are a German symphonic heavy metal band. As far as the design goes, I've never really been a fan of their albums. I always felt like the overall structure lacked either in one perspective or another, and this album is no different. Having said that, it is a step forward and definitely a step in the right direction. This is an album that has two sides. The first side is more balanced, more cohesive. It offers a better sense of fluidity from song to song because the characteristics of the songs blend better with one another, giving you a sense of continuity, which is really important with any record. The second half of the album is a little bit more dynamic. It offers bigger peaks and deeper valleys. This definitely creates a different type of movement, creates a different type of fluidity, but it feels a little bit of a departure from how the first half comes across. I think a blend of both sides would make the overall album be even more dynamic, even more engaging, and would give the album more of a cohesive touch, not just in one half of it, but across the entire existence of this record. As far as the sound is concerned, this record has big sound, but it's not overly produced. I actually felt like this album had more of an organic touch to it. It still has great production values, it still sounds phenomenal, really able to break apart all the different elements from the symphonic ones to the guitar driven elements to the drums and the impact that they have, and then obviously the vocal approach and how dynamic that vocal approach is. So I like the ability to dissect this record and dissect every single song, see what they have to offer, see the ebbs and flows, see the differences in soundscapes, but different soundscapes don't necessarily mean a different sound. This album definitely connects the dots and it brings these songs together under a single umbrella in a better way, in a more defined way, and this comes down to that sound experience and it comes down to that sound execution, one that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the substance, I enjoyed the texture, I enjoyed the delivery, and definitely the quality that it has, and not going over the top with that quality and perhaps stripping away some of the more natural elements of the band and of the compositions of these songs. Deeper within the sound, I have to touch on two elements, and I'm not going to talk about the symphonic elements because while they play a huge role throughout this album, they felt to me that they were more background. They didn't feel like they were driving the songs. They didn't feel like they had a direct impact on my experience. Perhaps I saw that more in previous albums, and on this one they were on the back seat. They were not even in the passenger seat, they were in the back seat. So they still play an important role, but they don't define the experience of the record, at least not as directly as the guitars and the drums. When it comes to the guitars, using acoustic elements, bringing some heaviness, adding melody, allows the guitars to be very versatile, to be very dynamic, to add to that fluidity of the record without necessarily making this a guitar-centric album, because it's not. This is an album that is not driven by one single element, but rather by all the elements coming together in order to create a very well-defined wall of sound. But the impact that the guitars have in that wall of sound perhaps gives them a bigger break. And this comes from using all of these different attributes. Like I said, the acoustic side, the heavier side, the more melodic side, really giving these songs a little bit of a different life, a little bit of a different touch, definitely a unique DNA to how the songs are put together, but a unique DNA that then blends well with the overall DNA of the sound of the album. So the guitars play an important role, not necessarily a defining role, but a very important role on how you're going to perceive the sound experience of this album. The drums do exactly the same in terms of the impact that they have, not necessarily in terms of the execution. One of the reasons why this album sounds so big is not because the symphonic elements are in your face or they're in the forefront, but rather because of how the drums come across. The drums give oomph to this record, they give substance to this album. They make the footprint of the record a lot wider without necessarily adding heaviness or volume to it. They just stretch that sound better, they have better way of moving that sound, and they don't create roadblocks in how that same sound is going to get from one point to another. I honestly felt like the drums played a very important role, perhaps one of the most important roles, not just by not getting in the way, but by giving the album the volume, or the size I should say, that it needed without heavily depending on those symphonic elements to try to make it too epic. You don't want the album to be too epic because that also thins out the sound. You want the album to be one that has a sense of size, but there is something within that size. It's not hollow, and definitely the drums are doing that from start to finish. As far as the vocals are concerned, Jennifer is phenomenal. I mean, she's an incredible vocalist. She was incredible in the previous albums, but something about this record feels different. Her voice feels a little bit more relaxed. It feels a little bit more free, and therefore feels a little bit more organic. It matches better with the styles and compositions of the songs, and it definitely matches better with the sound that was created for those same songs. Then sprinkling in some choir, some backing vocals, some harsh vocals here and there are just the needed spices to make this meal have flavor. And her voice already has a lot of flavor, but when you add those other elements, it just gives you more tools. It just gives more to the listener. It just makes the album more well-rounded, more complete, more mature. And that's how I feel towards this record. Everything kind of comes from the sound as the backdrop. Her voice then definitely defines that more mature sense that the album has. I've been very critical of this band in the past. I've been very critical of almost every single album that they have released. And while this album is not perfect, this album is definitely a step in the right direction as far as this band is concerned. I felt like this is their best album to date. Definitely the more mature sounding record, the better defined sounding record, the one that has the better production behind it. And this allowed everybody to be better at what they do. And it also allowed Jennifer to be even better at what she does. She is phenomenal throughout the entire record. Goosebumps kind of performance. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Free Me. This is my favorite song on the album by a mile. I love the beauty that this track has in the sound and in the vocal performance. Using the acoustic guitars to create melody, and not just melody that's there at the beginning, but melody that intertwines with the overall design of the song, definitely gives this song a better spinal cord, and it gives this song a better sense of progression, giving it a beginning, a middle, and definitely an end. It's a ballad style track, but a ballad style track that still has some volume, that still carries some heaviness, sound that grows, that it morphs, that evolves as the song progressing. Mixing symphonic elements allows this track to have that epic vibe to it, but it's not overly done. It's just done in the right amount that doesn't take anything away from the drum sound, from the guitars, and definitely from the vocal performance. The symphonic elements allow the sound to be better together. It fill in the gaps that could have existed otherwise, and definitely gives the sense of a much bigger track. A bigger track that is more contained in the verses, more explosive in the chorus. That Free Me in the chorus, that line there is so hooky, it's so catchy, it's so memorable. It erupts onto the track, and you're always going to remember this song because of that chorus, because of that definition of how that chorus comes across musically and vocally, and everything around leads you to that point. Beautiful track, incredibly constructed and perfectly delivered. Next we have Not in Our Name. The guitars in this song definitely lay the path. It's not a guitar driven track, but the guitars play a much bigger role in this song than, for example, on Free Me. Or on Free Me, because they were more acoustic, they played a different kind of role. Here they have a little bit more melody and heaviness. So the intertwined melody and heaviness, allowing the robust nature of those two elements to come into the forefront, making the guitars feel a little bit more present in terms of how the overall song is designed. Having harsh vocals mixed in with Jennifer's performance also give the same sort of intertwining that you see musically from the guitars. So there's a sense of balance between these two elements, between what's happening musically and what's happening vocally. This obviously makes the song feel heavier because the harsh vocals definitely add heaviness to the way the track comes across. Using them sometimes in the background and allowing Jennifer to come in the forefront creates volume. You can interpret that volume as heaviness. So it's a song that has an intact spinal cord. There is a guitar sound that guides your fluidity of the track, that becomes the red line in this track from beginning to end. And then you have this movement of sound that goes above and below, and then you have the same movement vocally that goes above and below. Really interesting song, a track that has a lot to offer. Last but not least, I Remember Dying. Now this is the closing track on the album, and when it comes to ballads on this record, or softer songs, whatever you want to call it, this one takes the lead. It's phenomenal. It's a vocally led song. The sound is there to create ambiance, the sound is there to create atmosphere, but let's not kid ourselves. This song is all about the vocal performance and how Jennifer guides you in that vocal performance. The track brings two different styles together. It feels like a ballad, it also feels like a hymn, almost like a Viking hymn. And when you bring these two worlds together with an incredible vocalist, allowing the sound to be in the backdrop, pushing her into the forefront, you have a track that becomes larger than life. The choirs, the backing vocals, all elements that make that larger than life sensation be a little bit more noticeable and easier to digest. I don't think you could close off on a softer track that sounds as big, as humongous as this one does. Bringing a little bit of a saxophone towards the end of the track is just the icing on the cake as far as layers and texture is concerned. Perfect closing track, and I'm normally not a fan of closing an album on a song like this, but this track, because of the elements that it has and the vocal performance that it gives, it definitely makes sense to put it towards the end. It's a curtain coming down, it's the end of a performance. This is it, Beyond the Black, with the self-titled Beyond the Black, out January 13th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.